It's Good Friday, and I'm super glad that you're here. Growing up in a Christian home, I heard the sentence of Jesus dying on the cross for our sins over and over again, week after week, Sunday after Sunday, to the point where I grew quite numb to it. We're so used to Good Friday that the gravity of it doesn't quite hit us anymore. In this video, I thought it would be cool if we could analyze some facts about the crucifixion and exactly what Jesus went through more from a physical point of view. It started the day before the crucifixion itself, Thursday evening, when Jesus took his disciples and right after the Last Supper, he went with them to the Mount of Olives into the Garden of Gethsemane. The Gospels tell us that there Jesus began to sweat blood. Now, this right here is a medical condition called hematidrosis. It's a very rare condition that can be triggered by intense psychological stress. What happens in this condition is that the chemicals that break down the capillaries are released into the sweat glands, which causes a small amount of bleeding into these glands. This results in a small amount of blood coming out with the sweat of the person. See, now what this does to the skin is that it makes it extremely fragile, which means that Jesus' skin would have been extremely sensitive and it would have stayed this way throughout the brutal act that was going to come the next day, the flogging. Roman floggings were known to be torture. Roman soldiers used whips of braided leather with small metal balls woven into them. When these whips were used on their victims, these metal balls would cause deep intrusions, causing the flesh of the victims to tear open. This would further be opened up with more and more blows. Sometimes small pieces of bone were also included in the Roman whips. Sometimes the spine of the victim would end up being exposed. This act was so terrible and so gruesome that physicians say that ribbons of flesh would peel out of the victim's body. The Roman soldiers whipped their victims from shoulder to back to buttocks to thighs all the way down to their legs. The victims would sometimes die right from the flogging itself, would often go into shock. But as terrible as the Roman flogging act was, there was always something worse that was to come: the crucifixion. Jesus had to carry his cross in that state, bleeding and in shock, all the way to Golgotha. Now, here's what would have happened at the crucifixion. Jesus would have been made to lay down and he would have been nailed to a horizontal beam with his hands outstretched. Roman soldiers used nails that were 5 to 7 inches long, and these nails were driven through the wrist of their victims, not the palms. You see, if Jesus was nailed through his palm, the weight of his body would have caused his skin to tear and he would have just fallen off the cross. No, the wrist was actually something much worse. Now, this is important. The nail would have gone through right where the median nerve runs, which is the largest nerve going out to the hand. And this nerve would have been crushed as the nails were being pounded in. Now, let me give you an example of what that feels like. Have you ever hit your elbow against a sharp object and hit your funny bone? And you know that intense pain that comes as if a shock was running through your arm? It's actually another nerve called the ulna, and it's quite terrible when you hurt it. But now imagine taking a set of pliers and squeezing that nerve and crushing it. That's the kind of pain that Jesus went through. It was unbearable, it was intolerable. In fact, it was so painful that there were no words to describe how painful it was. They had to come up with a new word itself: excruciating, which literally means out of the cross. At this point, Jesus would have been hoisted up as the horizontal beam was attached to the vertical stake, and nails would have been driven through his feet, causing the same nerves to be hit again. His entire body would have been stretched by around 6 inches in length, causing his shoulders to dislocate. And then begins the slow process of asphyxiation. You see, when a person is hanging from a cross, there is so much stress on his chest and diaphragm that it's almost impossible to breathe out. If the person needs to exhale, he needs to push up on his feet, almost like doing a pull-up in that condition, which would ease the tension on his muscles, allowing him to exhale. But this would cause the skin in his feet to tear because of the nail that's pierced through. He would be allowed to breathe out and then breathe in again for a moment, but only to push himself up again if he wanted to continue breathing. All this would happen while his back would scrape against the coarse wood of the cross, causing it to bleed more and more. And that's just the physical part of the crucifixion process. I can't even get into how horrible the emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects of it would have been for Jesus. That is how Jesus died. Now think about all that I've said. All the gruesome details of the crucifixion. The pain, the torture, the anxiety, the Roman flogging, the nails being driven through his wrists. And let this hit you hard as I say it. That should have been you. And that should have been me. That's what we deserve after all the wrong that we've done. That's what we deserve after living in sin. And Jesus took it all upon himself so that you and I could go free. And that's why it's a Good Friday that we celebrate. That's why it's the good news. Because Jesus died for you and me. And it was by no means an easy death.